بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. يا ربنا زدنا علما وتقوى وبارك في أوقاتنا وفي أقوالنا وفي أفعالنا وتقبل منا ولا تأخذنا بذنوبنا لقد ظلمنا أنفسنا ولا غافر لذنوبنا أنت. اهدنا إلى طريقة الحق واحفظنا وثبت أقدامنا وارزقنا بحسن الخاتمة ونصلي ونسلم على الذي أرسلته محمد بن عبد الله بالقرآن الكريم. أما بعد، we have to identify some things and be very clear on them. And that is that we are in a situation and in a time period where everybody wants to be an Imam and a Shaikh. And the sacrifice and the investment that it takes to be a serious Imam and a Shaikh, most don't want to make that commitment because it requires for you to be on the line on a number of different levels. In today's time, in 2020, let's talk reality. Let's talk about the situation as it is. Firstly, in the Muslim community, unlike in the Jewish community, unlike the Catholic community, the position of the Imam in actual reality doesn't mean much. Most of the Imams and the Mashaykh are not stable economically, healthcare, job security, recognition, regard, decision-making power, the space in which to develop and grow, a team that is ready to cooperate rather than dictate. Once we remove the Imam from the employee status into the leadership status, and once that Imam understands that the community has a say and that there's a space for the community as well, and that shura is necessary, and there's times when shura is binding and times when shura is not binding. In other words, we have to understand that there's occasions where the Imam has to be the leader that takes the lead and you have to follow, and there's times when the Imam is bound to follow. That's just the reality of the situation. If we want to take the concept of shura and its bindingness and its non-bindingness seriously. But the serious issue in the Muslim community overall is that, everything else, follows as a consequence, because you're talking about a lack of leadership and disruption in leadership. Everyone wants to be able to give the khutbah, but few want to stay around to do the counseling. You understand what I'm saying? People want to take the station of the Imam on many levels. Everyone wants to come in and dictate to the Imam. Dictate to the Imam job duties. Dictate to the Imam how to function. Dictate to the Imam what to say. Dictate to the Imam to include in the khutbah that there's fundraising to be done. Everyone wants to be a sheikh. Everyone wants to dictate what Islam is, what halal and haram is. Everyone wants to be at the forefront of teaching. But when it comes to the patience and the sacrifice of working through things to be a faqih, to be a person of fiqh, understanding, discrimination, in terms of being able to understand the subtleties of issues. Don't we have a hadith that indicates to the fact that the halal is clear and the haram is clear, and in between those two are ambivalent matters not known to the majority of people? The deen, when we start talking about fiqh in the deen, what is the meaning of fiqh in the Arabic language? The word fiqh has a number of different meanings in the Arabic language. And one of those is to understand things which have some complexity to them. Not just basic things, not just the issues of black and white, not just the issues that are at face value. I don't need somebody to tell me that the sky is blue, right? But if we want to go to why it is that the sky manifests itself as blue, and sometimes then you need a deeper knowledge. But the basic concept that you see and you perceive, and you say the sky is blue, you're not bringing me any details with that. You're not bringing me any deep knowledge with that. To tell me that this matter is haram and that matter is already clear in the deen. There's some things in the deen, ma'loom min ad-deen bi durura, as we say. They're known by necessity from the deen. In other words, it doesn't matter if a 5-year-old says it, if a 20-year-old says it, if a PhD says it, if a person that studied 50 years says it, if a person that doesn't know how to read says it. It's just clear cut. We all know that there's times that are obligated for the salah. 5 times a day. We know that. That doesn't need someone to come and to reiterate. And so there's things that a lot of you, and I have to say it like that you reiterate and you act like it's something, you act like it has some profundity to it, like it's complicated, and it's not. It's issues that we know that are clear. Those are not the issues necessarily that we have to deal with unless we're talking about implementing those things, how to implement them. Like, for instance, now, how do we implement the salah in the middle of a pandemic? And this is another issue that we have, imams and mashaykh, that we're underdeveloped. And I include myself in that because we're a work in progress. I don't have any qualm in saying there's always room to grow. Anything other than that is pure arrogance, if not punishable before Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. We're deficient. There's truth to that. But there's also a situation in which there's supposed to be leadership in the ummah. If you get, who had, to just come up with ideas about how to navigate the salah, fine, people can do that. But then at the end of the day, people are still asking the imams, the mashaykh, is this allowable in the deen? So it's like, again, people want the leadership. They want the leadership and the legitimacy. You know what I'm saying? They want the imam to be there for legitimacy solely, but not for the leadership. Not for the leadership. This is the fundamental problem that the Muslim community has. Deficient leadership, and everybody wants to be a leader. Inept scholar and ignorant follower, as was said back in the day. So we have, that's the fundamental situation, that everyone wants to step in to talk about what Islam is, when 95% of the people have not applied themselves to study the deen properly, systematically. Everyone wants to jump in and talk about what Islam is. In situations where even some of us that have been studying for years, we're like a little hesitant to speak with that level of certainty, the way that some people have. And the consequences of what they say, they don't care. They don't care. That's why everybody is not cut out to be a scholar or imam. If the Muslim community was serious with the way that it's serious as talk about, with talking about every issue and jumping in to talk about every issue and tell us what haram is on every issue and tell us who's wrong on every issue and tell us who's a kafir on every issue. This is where the Muslim community is at. If we were to take a mirror and put it to our faces, and our faces being the way that we comport ourselves, and watch ourselves in the process, like watch as if you're an outsider to the community, as if you're not a Muslim, the way that we treat people, the way that we interact. And see, people, they don't like these types of talks. And I've had a lot of brothers that have fallen out with me because they feel as though it's inappropriate. But no, we want to talk about tazkiyat an-nafs, purification of heart. Where's the muhasabah at? Where's the taking ourselves to account? Because at the end of the day, what is of utmost importance to us as a community is to have a solid ground with the way that we deal with each other. You know why? Because at the end of the day, what goes on in your heart is between you and Allah wa ta'ala. What goes on in your heart is only known to you and Allah wa ta'ala. But what goes on between you and I, that's where it becomes the issue of fiqh, of responsibility and rights, and justice and equity, and fiqh of priorities, what takes priority, how to organize ourselves, and so on and so forth. This is the fundamental reason why the Muslim community is in disorder. Because everyone wants to be an imam and a sheikh and this and that. And at the end of the day, the imams and the mashaykh have no real place. And again, I said, and I admit, and I mentioned this before, and I've mentioned this over the years, mashaykh and imams, we need to develop ourselves because the challenges are new. This is not only something that the Muslim community has to take account of and do and engage in the leadership. That's why we're supposed to have continuing development. When I was studying to be a priest, there was an African-American priest. He came in, one of the only few African-American priests that was in that region in Ohio. And I believe he actually came in from Philadelphia. If I remember correctly, he was an orator, master in communication and other things. And he came in and he told a congregation, part of them were racist and others. He said, you live in a time period in the 20th century. This was last century. He said, where you have an educated group of people in the congregation. You have to stay on par. You understand what I'm saying? As a leader, you have to stay on par. You have to develop yourself. You're not dealing with the same crowd that you were dealing with decades back where they just listen. They want to engage. So you have to prepare yourself to be able to engage. And that's what I say to the imams and the mashaykh. You have to stay on top of it. Because the educated community, so to speak, outside of Islamic sciences, they carry an edge with them. And part of the edge that they carry with them is that they have positioned themselves in the system. So part of their edge at the end of the day comes back to they're cutting you a check. So they feel as though, and this is a reality, they feel as though that they own you. They feel as though that because it's their money, they have a sway over you. And that's part of the problem. You understand what I'm saying? That's part of the issue. That it becomes like buying the leadership to say what I want to say, to legitimize. That's where the Muslim community is at. And that's why if an imam, even if he's wrong, you know what I'm saying? Even if he's wrong, an imam is always walking on eggshells. And I say it like that because, you know what I'm saying? There's situations where there's room for growth and room for development. So what about if he's right? What about if the imam is right? In the situation that the imam speaks out against an injustice, and of course does it in a principled way and so on and so forth, but he speaks out against an injustice and demands a change in the community itself. The Muslim community goes through a filter. Well, the donors, well, the public image, well, this, well, that, to the point where the imam and the mashaykh are powerless. That's why you don't see imams and mashaykh taking the lead anymore in the Muslim community. If you compare that back to the situation of in the African American community, when the imams took the lead, it was completely different. And there were deficiencies, but still, it was completely different. It was completely different. I know a community where the imam took the lead in the Palestinian community. I know a couple communities like that in the Palestinian community. The imam took the lead. The masjid got a school. The masjid created a neighborhood. Literally created a neighborhood. Literally the imam made the call and people started buying up the houses and buying up property. They expanded the masjid out. They had a school. Sure, there's some deficiencies. Sure, the imam still has to grow. But guess what? They built a community. The money was invested in expanding the community. Now flip that to when the professional community comes in, and this is a radical critique. Flip that to when the professional community comes in and they take on, now we're 5 million in debt for a building. with no, there's no prospects. There's barely any money for salaries for people to develop that center or that masjid or whatever it may be. And there's a lot of issues like this. You know what I'm saying? There's no other religious community that's functioning like this. No other religious community is functioning in this way. And until we get that situation correct, imams have to develop themselves, mashaykh have to develop themselves. And I'm saying that it's a two-way street. Imams and mashaykh have to develop themselves in counseling, in political science, and leadership skills, community organizing, being involved. It's not just the issue of reciting the Quran in the most beautiful tones, and you sit down in your office and your stomach grows fat. You understand what I'm saying? It doesn't work like that. But also at the same time, the professional community has to get its act together, because it's an obstacle to the growth of the Muslim community. Now we have everyone having an opinion about what Islam is and what Islam is not. That comes from that breakdown. And then we wonder why the youth are confused about the deen and what direction to go in. Right? Between the imams and the community organization stuff and the people, we have created serious problems as a whole. Everyone has a responsibility in the problems that we're facing right now. Everyone has a responsibility. The imams need to get themselves together. The mashaykh need to get themselves together. And that situation that we're in now is one in which there's so much bickering over how to practice the deen that it has forced others to take the leadership in the community. That's the reality at the end of the day. And those people who want to take the leadership, if they want to be in the leadership role, fine. If you want to take my job, fine, prepare yourself. I don't have, if you're better to take my job, no problem. But rizq is from Allah, tabaraka wa ta'ala. That's the bottom line. Rizq is from Allah. No one can cut my rizq. No one can cut the rizq of anyone at the end of the day. That's the bottom line. Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala is the one that dictates those terms, not any of us. And so that's part of the major situation, that until this is corrected, nothing moves forward. Imams and mashaykh are central in the problem because they fail to work together. There's too much sectarianism and underpreparedness. The professional community is part of the problem because they don't trust the imams and the mashaykh to make a lead or invest in them enough. That's the bottom line. It's all show madahiriya at this point. And I want to end on that note of saying, until we correct that, we are never going to be in a situation of empowerment as a community. Because you can't move with 1,000 people wanting to be in charge. And also you can't move with a dictator being in charge on a regular basis and expect continuity. Once that dictator dies, he may have done a good job. He may have rocked the world. He may have made some moves. But once that dictator dies, you have corrupted the community so much that no one can take the lead. And that's not the minhaj of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in any event. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.